Okay, so hello. I'm A.Wilkes. I am responsible for looking after the stakeholder engagement and also consumer vulnerability work that we do at WPD. This first session is just to give you a little bit of context about Western Power and what we do. Some of you it might be familiar, but for those that are new to our business, it's just a bit of an intro about what we do, and perhaps most importantly, how we plan to engage for our next business plan period, which we're right at the start of the planning for at the moment. We are, for the jargon in the day, we are a distribution network operator, a DNO. It's our job to run the electricity infrastructure that we take from the national grid. We run all of the overhead lines, underground cables, substations, and all of the assets and kit that transmit energy through to the final cable that enters the meter within your home or your business. So at the top of that chain, you've got traditionally large centralised power generation, which flows into the national grid, and we take it at something called a grid supply point, so around 132 kV. Flow it down through and get it to that final cable, as I say. We do that within our territory. We have 7.9 million connection points, so that's homes and businesses connected to the grid. That means a population of 20 to 25 million folk relying on us to keep the lights on every day. We do that across 4 territories, so we do that across the East Midlands, West Midlands, South Wales and South West. So that takes in some really big urban cities and some quite rural dispersed areas as well. So we've got a very big variety of network that we look after. But life is changing. So we are traditionally a DNO, but what we're finding is the types of things connecting directly onto our system is going through a huge revolution. So we have much more low carbon generation, so distributed generation connecting direct to our system. Things like, as the graphics show, wind and solar. You also have energy storage now, represented by the batteries there, that again is flowing onto the system. As we will discuss later on, we have electric vehicles connecting, potentially heat pumps in the future, all of which mean that it's not just a one-way energy flow going through the voltage levels out to the final customer. We're seeing two-way power flows, we're seeing a much more dynamic system which needs real-time operation, which needs sort of smart operations on our part, and we're working very hard to do that. So the language you might start to hear throughout this session is a DNO shifting to be a DSO. So what does that mean in a practical term? Well, we've always traditionally carried out 4 simple functions, which is keeping the lights on a day-to-day basis, maintaining that huge asset base that we have. Maintaining it, it's in terms of its sort of quality and making sure that aging equipment is switched out and is kept on top of. And probably most prominently and most visibly, it's about fixing the network when it falls down. So when there are power cuts, when severe weather impacts the network, it's our staff that are out there 24/7, 365 days a year, fixing the network and providing new connections to the grid. Traditionally, that's demand connections, things like new homes, new businesses, things that are taking power from the system. So those are the 4 things we typically do. But as I say, as we become a DSO, what you start to find is the type of things connecting, on that sort of 4th box along, the types of thing connecting is becoming far more dynamic and far more generation coming on stream as well as demand. And what that means is we have additional responsibilities, but this isn't about us stopping doing anything we've done before, but it's about becoming smarter around we manage two-way flows, we balance the energy system in more real time. So, to lead you into why we want to talk to you and why we want stakeholders to get involved with our stakeholder engagement programme. Ultimately, we are a regional monopoly. You are a customer of ours by virtue of where you work or where you live. We are therefore regulated, and the regulator sets things called price control reviews, which are sort of fixed periods that we put a business plan in up front with very, very clear deliverables within it. And if we do well against that, that dictates the money we can earn. And if we don't do so well, we end up giving money back to customers in a simplistic sort of explanation of it. So Ofgem looks after our sort of industry. They are there essentially to mimic competition, so protect the interests of consumers by mimicking competition. Clearly you can't vote with your feet, as it were, by leaving unless you move out of our patch. So Ofgem has a series of sort of regulatory measures within a price control which replicate essentially fining us, to replicate people choosing to leave us, or potentially opportunities for us to earn money, which in a broad sense replicates as gaining customers were at a competitive environment. So periodically we put those business plans in, and we'll be doing so in a timeline I'll show you on the next slide, and they go forward for Ofgem's approval. Ofgem's next price review for us will be running 5 years, so it will cover the period 2023 out to 2028. For those that are familiar, the current price review runs for 8 years, so we're in the middle of an 8-year review at the moment, but we're going back to 5. And stakeholder engagement is so important in that process. It's very, very important. It's not us coming up with our commitments, it's talking to people and finding out what matters to you and responding to that and giving you the right of reply before we submit our plans to Ofgem. So we just try to get all the jargon out front straight away for you. So we will naturally, throughout this session, refer to RIO and RIO ED1 and RIO ED2. Those are the bits of jargon, those are the names for the price review. The current price review, the one that we find ourselves in at the moment, which runs until the year 2023, is called RIO ED1. And it essentially breaks down as, it's the way that our revenues are calculated, the way we make our money is comprised of incentives, innovation and outputs, and the ED, as you can read, is electricity distribution 1, and we're moving to the second period of this structure in the future. So to take it in reverse order, the difference with this structure is that historically networks were very much regulated in terms of just cost and efficiency, and whilst those are still very absolute key tenets, it's very, very important that stakeholders and customers understand what they get for their money. So that starts with outputs, where at the moment we're very, very clear. We set out 76 outputs for this current period, clear things that customers know what they're getting for their money. There are drivers to be as innovative as possible about how we do that, making the network smarter, as I've mentioned, and making our operations more and more efficient. And there are certain things that are so important within those outputs that they warrant an incentive. So if you take the example of customer service, if we can be in a leading position within the industry, there's an opportunity for us to earn rewards. If we are below an acceptable threshold, then we'll be penalised, and that's the same for network performance, losses off the network's connections, and our overall business efficiency. And stakeholder engagement runs under the whole lot, and that's the reason we're talking, as we now move from ED1 to ED2, we want to find out what are those things you really, really value for us to commit to next time around. So, last couple of slides from me this is the timetable, high-level timeline we're working to, because it probably feels like a price review starting in 2023 and we're starting to talk to people in 2019 about it. That seems like overkill, that's a lot of time. But actually when you row it back, Ofgem will ultimately make a decision on the business plan in early 2022, and that is predicated by us having submitted that plan in March 2021. Now, last time around, we were what's known in the industry as fast-tracked. So our business plan was accepted first time around. So Ofgem liked the quality of it, liked the fact that it was so well justified by talking to stakeholders such as yourselves. It's our absolute aspiration to be the best company at this again, and we want to go after that sort of fast-track opportunity again. In order to do so, we've set ourselves an ambitious target, which is we plan to publish 2 drafts of our business plan before we submit to the regulator. So actually it'll be version 3 that goes in. And the logic for that is, so around December 2020, we'll have the sort of the second version, and we'll have put a very first version out in September 2020. So you start to see, actually, from today to then, there's an awful lot for us to do in terms of asking you those questions. And we want to do that because we want the final plan to be absolutely well justified, and to have moved up and have moved down, and new priorities to have come in, and maybe priorities to have moved out of it, based on your feedback. And in terms of how we do that then, we've set ourselves the aspiration of doing 5 stages of engagement. And the events that we're doing sort of in early 2019 represent preliminary engagement. So we're doing as much blank piece of paper with you as possible around what are the priorities you want us to deliver as a business. We'll then be moving in around the autumn time of 2019 into adding some detail into that. So if you told us power cuts is so important to you, we'll start to give options about how we deliver that, around duration, around frequency, around worst served customers, around reducing the flicks and dips on the system, for example. And we'll start to ascertain with stakeholders how much do they value us delivering actions within that. And all of that will build towards early next year as starting to develop the plan. Starting to get sections of it with clear commitments. We'll then put it out in September 2020, as we've said, and ask you, and we'll move it up, we'll move it down, we'll make those changes, and that's at stage 4. And finally, stage 5, so around December of 2020, we'll be hopefully just checking how acceptable that final draft of the plan is to you, and we'll make those final tweaks, and then we'll get it submitted. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's fairly logical. We really want to build this from the ground up with your help. We will have a variety of engagement opportunities for you. We will have things on our website, we'll have webinars, we'll have surveys, we'll have sort of podcasts, market research, as well as face-to-face events. We want to put it all into the mixing pot to get as much insight as we possibly can. So at this point,